record. Hello, John.
Good evening, Oliver.
Yes, so today we're going to talk about sentencing, criminal sentences, particularly in light of Natasha O Brien. Natasha was beaten unconscious by a 22-year-old Cathal Crotty, a soldier from County Clare, and he received a 3-year suspended sentence, and this has caused absolute uproar.
Yeah, it did. But the trouble is, not alone did he do this unprovoked attack on this lady in Limerick, he boasted about it on social media, as if like somehow or other people of that caliber think that that's okay. It's never okay to attack unprovoked a complete stranger and cause such injuries to her and serious injuries, because aside from the physical injuries, there's also psychological injuries that you can't walk the street without the fear of being attacked by some disordered individual, because this soldier, the Irish Army has a good reputation. But if the court didn't sentence him to a real jail term, I presume the Army will take steps that he will be sentenced because of his actions, bringing disrepute on the Army. Because one would hope that there's discipline in the Army, and not alone discipline, but there's right order. Because when you're in the Army, you have to obey commands. Now, what he did, and he's brought disrepute on the Army, and I presume that they will charge him with bringing disrepute to the Army, and he will be sentenced by the Army themselves. And then when that's finished, he'll be dismissed forthwith, because you can't have people like that in the Army. What he did.
Absolutely.
And the court has been most, what's the word, didn't represent the interests of the victim. That should be the first consideration in any court, in any jurisdiction, and in this country particularly, because of the lack of sentencing by the court of serious assaults on people all over the country. And taking into account this, that, and the other, the victim should be the one that should be looked after as regards free legal aid, and their view should be taken into account, because you can have psychological damage for an unprovoked attack that you didn't deserve, and you weren't in a situation where this should happen to you in the public street. You see, and this individual, by boasting about it on social media, is guilty twice over. And I don't know what the justice system can find that an individual like that can be only getting a suspended sentence when he should have got a serious custodial sentence. And the victim should have been interviewed and not treated like a second-class citizen. Because that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, look, I mean, the sentencing in this case is not correct, and it's been appealed. The DPP, I think, have appealed the actual sentencing. When they look at sentencing in courts in Ireland, okay, you have what's called a maximum sentence. In this case, it would have been 5 years. That's now been increased to 10 years, but they can't do a retrospective sentencing in this case, okay? And then you have the principle of sentencing is proportionality, which is the nature of the offence versus the circumstances of the offender. And they make adjustments, mitigating factors such as guilty plea, previous good character, remorse, compensation, and that ultimately leads to the sentence. The problem I have with this is that I think what they need to do is they need to look at the victim. The victim should have some input into the sentencing of the criminal.
They should have major influence, and they should be assisted by the state for the expense of having the sort of support that the perpetrator has by way of free legal aid with solicitors and barristers and all the rest of it. Whereas the victim has to pay for whatever they want, and it should be the opposite. The victim should have the support of the state to mount their case, and the prosecution mounting their case with the aid of the victim. It's the other way about. It's the criminal that perpetrated the act is the one that gets all this free legal aid and all the rest of it, and that's not correct. It should be the victim, assuming that they're still alive, that they haven't been actually killed, because Dublin, unfortunately, even in 2019, which I would do the years, and you'd be surprised all that you come across. But this particular one is relevant to what we're talking about. On the 3rd of June 2019, the Archbishop of Dublin, which at the time is he's retired since, it was Archbishop Dermot Martin. He issued a statement about Dublin, and he made a public statement that there's a level of violence, and in brackets, in an unprecedented extent of what did he call it? Especially at a level of depravity. Now, that was in 2019. Now, he would be the Archbishop of Dublin. He's living in a nice residence in Drumcondra, but the Pro Cathedral is in Marlborough Street, which is Dublin 1. And he would have the evidence of priests that serve in various parishes in the Dublin area, particularly on the north side. And this is the statement that he issued. But there's no report of the government taking any action. Mr. Varriker, who was not known as a practicing Catholic, was Taoiseach stroke Prime Minister at the time. And he had an agenda that didn't support the Catholic viewpoint in a lot of cases. And he got his comeuppance when people voted no in 2 recent referendums. And so he was obliged to resign, thank God, because of the harm that he inflicted on the country, in my book. And it was Fine Gael. And they have, unfortunately, making statements, and you can say this, that, or the other, but what we see, the evidence on the street and in the courts is not right. And so this question of sentencing would want to be a big change, because people are sick and tired of criminals getting sentences but suspended. That's not a sentence whatsoever. They have a record, and it means then they won't be accepted into most countries, certainly not the United States, because a person with a criminal record is never allowed in there. So they have protections. This is why there's a great problem in the United States with the laxity in the border under the democratic rule, that there's millions got in, including dangerous terrorists from different parts of the world using it as coming in. And apparently there's quite a number of millions, and it's causing a lot of trouble in that country. Now, we have a similar problem here with the amount that they've let in. And now this question of more coming by Britain and up to because the border in the north is, they got dispensation for this. So they're using it in this terrible way that there's a crowd now coming down here that should never come here, because we never conquered any country like the British. They conquered countries and had a very bad reputation in every country that they ever conquered. China, for instance, they tried to make them all drug addicts when they had that. So they have a very bad record. And in this country, they have a very bad record. And this fellow, Sonic, who's a kind of a first-generation immigrant himself, has the audacity to send these asylum seekers that they were going to send to Rwanda, and they don't fancy going to Rwanda, so coming here through the 6 counties, and I think some of the police were in the border then stopped some and didn't allow them in. But I mean, they'd want to be doing more than that. We have an army. What are they there for? If Sunnik is doing this, he should be reported, and our ambassador should be recalled. It's not good enough. We're already swamped, and now they're living in tents and all the rest of it. So between that and the lack of policing, how can anybody police a city like Dublin, where when I was in it yesterday, I think the most of the people that I come across was from other jurisdictions and marching about in the middle of the day. I think that's a very strange way to be, because let's face it, that means they're not working. So what way are they living? There's ones in tents in areas where there should never be, Mount Street and places where people are living and working. And you don't know what sort of people they are. So this is no way for a country to be run, in my book. So it's all combining to make the business of law and order very difficult. People like this should be not allowed to do what they're doing. And I think what they did was house some of them before, but there's so many coming that they're wasting their time, and they should be sent back where they come from forthwith. I mean, have to know laws that they can look after the Irish people.
Yeah,
You
look,
get me drift. How can you police a city like Dublin that has so much ones from other jurisdictions? Because the business of racism comes into the picture, and it's nothing got to do with that. It's law and order, isn't it?
that's it. Look, I think Ireland's very much a victim of its success when you have a country that that has so many jobs and has almost zero unemployment. You're going to have obviously you're going to have hundreds of thousands of people coming into the country, hundreds of them, thousands of them. But the thing is that Ireland, I would describe it as an infrastructurally broken country, and when you talk about sentencing, I suppose there's I think the prisons at the moment in Ireland are running at something like 110% capacity, right? So like the housing crisis, when you have to build more houses when you have more people, you have to build more prisons when you have more people. One thing I want to say to you is that something that I've always noticed, coming from I'm a person from Kerry, half my life and most of my life in Dublin, but a good part of my life in Kerry. I've always noticed when I'm reading the newspapers in Kerry, the Kerry Man, okay, and the Kerry's Eye, there seems to be a great disparity between sentencing between rural Ireland and city sentencing. By the city judges seem to are more lenient. In this case, it was unusual. This is Limerick Circuit Court for the sentencing of Cathal Crotty, right? And he's got away here with a suspended sentence, which shouldn't have ever have happened. I'm wondering what the judge was thinking, what was going through his mind, what mitigating factors were there. But I have noticed anyway that there seems to be a disparity. The rural people in rural Ireland, regardless of the crime, whatever it's a road traffic offence, whatever it is, the judges come down heavy on rural Ireland to the people, and the people in the city get off lightly, usually. It's an observation
that's absolutely ridiculous. The city has more crime, so therefore there should be more sentencing. But if there's not enough space in prisons, they want to have some other facility, like Spike Island. There was a facility there, and there should be facilities in the army, in the Corps, where they used to have prisoners there one time as well. That was come spurring against the state. But I mean, they need to be able to put these into custody, and there's enough places in Ireland that could be secure with prison guards, so that these people can be sentenced to. If they don't actually build actual prisons, that there are other places that can be adapted to that facility, and they'd want to wake up and do something, because talk is cheap. and they do a lot of talking, but no action. And when the Archbishop of Dublin in 2019 said what he said, and he would be in favor that the level of violence is a mark of depravity. Now, that's very strong words, isn't it? So that was in 2019, and it's got worse. And when you're walking around Dublin, you do feel slightly intimidated because there's not enough Irish people. I see mostly people from other countries of all colours. And when I see them marching about in the middle of the day, I don't know what way they're surviving. But must be a big pressure on accommodation. And I think some of these people get preference over Irish people in rented accommodation paid for by the state. So this state, by the way, what they owe abroad is astronomical, in the order of over 200 billion. And so they're living on credit. So there's a very shaky foundation. If you owe too much money, how long are you going to be able to stay afloat? So there's a day of reckoning coming somewhere along the line. And what the EU is imposing by way of taking all these people from every jurisdiction without any passports or this, that, or the other, they're tearing them up and coming in whatever way they come in. And suddenly they're looked as if they're stateless. There's nowhere you can send them back. But that shouldn't be allowed. That'd be a criminal offence. It won't be allowed in any other country. Would that carry on? So the EU is on a collision course, and they're going to fail because citizens now are reacting in other European countries. In other countries now, even in France, the largest party now is led by Marie Le Pen, and they call her extreme right, but they're not extreme. These are labels that the left put on people that don't support their own agenda, which is actually diabolical in some ways. They haven't a clue about what's right and what's wrong. You see where I'm coming from? But now in Europe, which is the thing from here, they voted for all these parties. And the chances are in France, they're so peculiar to have two elections. The Marie Le Pen's party has a majority. Macron, Macroni, the president of France,
Macron.
whatever his name is, he called the election thinking that people might wake up, but they have woken up and that they don't trust them. You get me drift. This is the fellow that wants to make abortion kind of in the Constitution or something. So he's got a good trouncing. But will it get through to his thick head? I'm afraid it will, because he'll get the bum's rush if they're going to be in the government, and there will be, because it'll be the largest party. So
Very
that's
good.
in France, and the same in other countries. There's all parties are being elected, and Denmark is dealing with the issues that we have here, and they're dealing with it in a very straightforward fashion. None of this sort of stuff that we go on with here, you know. So all these are factors they're indicating in Europe, and it's a trend, and it's going to be a trend that will happen here too, I think, because most people are fed up with this crowd that has been running the country into the ground. It doesn't matter what to say; it's what they do that counts.
That's the thing. I think like when we look at crime in general, I mean this particular video is about criminal sentencing, and how they come to their conclusions and that, But I think one thing they need to look at in Ireland is the alcohol and drug use is out of control.
Correct and right. And Dublin is awash with it, and they have these treatment clinics in the centre city. And you see these individuals, they're in the like of Abbey Street and that. I remember myself and my late wife were going about our business. Next thing is a couple of these yokes come across the road, and they were drugged, women and others. And I use strong language. There was none of this sort of being whatever you like to be. I just use pretty strong language. I clear off. I said, all right, get the police on you, or something like that. And this is the middle of the day, about 12 o'clock. So these yokes are going around and they're clueless. And somebody did a video about O'Connell Street and all the different nationalities. And you could see somebody asleep in the street, O'Connell Street. Like, what does the police do? They don't say they're going around, but they're actually not doing anything about it. That chap that's on the street sleeping, or whatever's wrong with him, he'd need to be put into an institution to try and deal with whatever problems he has. And the same with the others that's at this racket. It's no good sort of being try to give them shelter for the night and then they're out again. Deal with the problems that they have. They could have come from bad homes. They could, God knows what happened. When the Christian TV Ireland gets going, all these issues will be dealt with compassionately with people. And I hope it can get going sooner rather than later, so as we can look after and deal with these issues and see what solutions can be found. I don't hear any solutions offered for what I see on the streets of Dublin. And there has to be solutions. These people coming from other jurisdictions and living in tents, they'd want to put into institutions and not housed and Irish people displaced, put into some places where their freedom is curtailed and they have to be responsible and maybe re-educated, if you like, in what's civil authorities. And, they want to establish where these people are from. You see where I come from. So all this accounts for the instability and the danger in Dublin and perhaps in other cities, because the same problem probably exists in all the places in the country, because I see it myself. I travel around a good bit and I see what I see.
John Malone, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alma. Bye now.